So I'm a small developer, I could go cross-platform, but say I've only got enough bandwidth to target one platform. We've been talking about iOS and Android. iOS is obviously a massive ecosystem. Android is also massive and seemingly growing faster, although sometimes it's hard when you look into the numbers of how many of these are in China or what have you. Massive ecosystem. And then there's other things that come in, like the average iOS user may spend a lot more money than the Android user. So how do you make a choice on what platform to go after? Like, what kind of things do you think about there?
It depends on what your experience is. If you're a game, it's one thing. If it's, it's a shopping experience, it's another. And, I think that in many cases, it'd be a mobile web experience you'd want to go with first. But in other cases, you'd want to go with a native. If you do go native, our experience is that even though, the numbers say that Android has a bigger installed base now, the transactions are taking place on the iPhone by a significant margin, 2 to 1.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I think it depends on your demographic and the type of app you're delivering. So if you're trying to get into market, that's more people have Androids, then you want to build an Android device. But I think transactional data shows that iOS users are paying more and transacting more in the apps. I also think that starting with mobile web is a great approach. Building a mobile website, well, you can write it in a way that it'll at least be viewable on iOS, Android, subset of BlackBerries and some other devices out there, and then you can start to see usage patterns across that, and then target either a hybrid app or a native app based on the kind of market and type of app you're going after. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that question.
And sometimes there's a demographic difference on your apps as well. Like we found with the Nook, for example, there's a very specific demographic. You can get a much higher turn rate or conversion rate on things like e-commerce for certain types of. So that's sort of Android, but in a different subset of Android that might have higher yield than just sort of a generic Google Play App Store.
So you talked about maybe choosing the mobile web first when doing an experience. And we've noticed that some companies like Path and Flipboard have sort of ignored the web entirely. Why do you think they did that? And I'm kind of looking at you, David, in a sense, because you're exposed to a lot of different startups and you're advising them on the experiences that they create. When people choose to eschew the web, is it a lack of business discipline? Is it just people just saying, hey, I want it to be cool, so I'm just going to do iOS?
I think it totally depends on what the app is, what the customers are. Like, I think in Flipboard's case, Flipboard is, if anybody follows me on Twitter, it's by far my favorite app that's ever come out, and I think that's like what the iPad was made for. But I think they're totally fine, because they're curating the web into a more readable point of view. They don't need to go back to the web. And you can. They bring up their in-app browser if you need to, and all that's fine. I think with certain companies, I think with Path, I think Instagram, which is one of ours, but I think that was a big mistake. And I think you can even see post-acquisition Instagram catching up with itself, now doing profile views and photo views on the web. But in talks I gave like a year or two ago, I would actually put Path up on the thing because, you would get these emails saying, John wants to be your friend, and you'd click accept, and it would say, please open the app. And literally, you're clicking from your desktop, and like 90% of us work behind a desktop computer all day long, and to just have nothing there, I would say is irresponsible for certain types of apps.
Okay. We have another question from a Tim Kiefer to you, Andre, about sort of life after the acquisition, and just sort of asking, how is Adobe influencing the PhoneGap roadmap now? What is life like now that Adobe's injected sort of resources into it? He asks if they've helped it or hurt it. And obviously, you're probably not going to say that they've hurt it.
Well, I think they've helped it tremendously. Like, two big things happened a year ago with PhoneGap. One is we contributed PhoneGap to the Apache Foundation. The other was we were acquired by Adobe. It's no coincidence that those things happened at the same time. We actually made a condition of the deal contributing PhoneGap to the Apache Foundation so that we were comfortable with its stewardship in the long run. So at Adobe's influence, we have more resources to work on the project. We ship a release almost every month, and it's more consistent, which is great. We have more focus, I think, on the platform. We're able to build more tools around it and be less worried about the business model for the platform itself, because Adobe has all these other tools that are starting to integrate with PhoneGap, and that's going really well. And then after we contributed to the Apache Foundation, what was really interesting is before there was Nitobi, the small company up in Vancouver, and then IBM contributing. So we were kind of the two players there, which I think we had a good balance, and that was great to have a big contributor like that. But since in the last year, now we have Google, Microsoft, RIM, Intel, HP, all these big companies have signed contributor agreements for Apache, and they're contributing code on a regular basis. So now when we have an issue with like Android, we can just go to the Google team who's contributing to Cordova and say, hey guys, what's up? Can you help us out with this? And they'll go ping the right people. So the project is, I think, healthier and stronger and moving faster than it ever has. So I think that's great. Our engineering team has more ability to just focus on the problem at hand. So yeah, I think for PhoneGap, it's been, the acquisition's been extremely successful. And the same people who were setting the direction for the project before are still setting it now, so it's great.
Just a point of clarification, PhoneGap, the open source project, became Cordova, and then the PhoneGap name became a commercial product at Adobe. Is that?
Well, so we actually just distribute Cordova straight up now, pretty much. Cordova is the name of the project at the Apache Foundation. There's some copyright kind of junk that happens when you contribute to the Apache Foundation. So we decided to keep the PhoneGap name. At some point, we'll have a distribution of Cordova that will be called PhoneGap. But if you go to phonegap.com today, you download Cordova essentially. But anything we do around PhoneGap or Cordova as a distribution of that platform will always be open source. There's no like commercial version or not open source version out there.
Okay, so you just didn't want to give the Apache Foundation perpetual rights to the PhoneGap name. That's why it changed.
You know, I would have been happy to give them the name. It's just then if you're doing a marketing event or you want to make a T-shirt or something, you have to get permission, and it's quite cumbersome. You know, it's
totally. Makes total sense.
So there's just weird little things like that. Whereas like the code and the contributor community, I think is Apache's a great place for that. And then we have other tools too, like we want PhoneGap Build, which is a cloud service where you just upload your HTML and JavaScript, and we compile all your native apps and do code signing and build other features. And there's other tools we're going to be releasing around PhoneGap, which we would like to leverage that name for, so not be encumbered by some, copyright, trademark kind of issues. So yeah, and then other companies are, they're free to come up with their own Cordova distributions too, and it's baked into products from, IBM and Salesforce and Zend and all these guys, and I think that's great. We want the platform to grow and become better and spread as far and wide as possible.
Cool. So Brian Gill, I believe, of Netflix, at least last time we talked to him was at Netflix, had a question that kind of talks about these silly little tablets that we're holding up here that make it look like we're holding a big iPod Touch or something. And which is like, does this whole HTML5 versus native debate change if you think about the context of the tablets? And so in your mind, do you think differently about tablet and whether you'd want to use the HTML5 technology wrapped as an app, PhoneGap style, or just even when to use an app for iPad and other tablets versus the tablet website?
Are you guys using the web or using a native Twitter app?
The native Twitter app.
Native Twitter.
I was just curious.
I personally think that you should be going to search.twitter.com. No, so I do think that what happens is that you start to build, let's say, a phone app, and you might go native, and then you have to redesign for the tablet, and you build that, and then what happens to the desktop? You get lost there, right? I mean, all of the Android and iOS are all client-side technologies, but they only work on phones and tablets. I mean, they don't work in your car. They're not going to work on your television. I mean, only if you have Apple products, right, in that ecosystem. So ultimately, I think the web gives you the advantage to easily tackle those types of new devices that come out and get to market faster. So ultimately, I think that you should be choosing the web technologies because it's getting better every single day. And I think that's the future.
So
but wait till the future. I mean, for now, it's not.
I think it's ready today.
It's not.
It is.
Well, for us, here we go. Here we go.
That's what they really want.
Honestly, I mean, everybody needs to decide for themselves. I mean, maybe you have an application that does absolutely fine, and there's no difference in the native world. And you know,
I would
sure, why would you build
there, I think, I've always thought, like, one of the huge advantages of the web is not just, you know, instant deployment or anything, but literally just CSS. Compared to styling something in Objective-C or Java is a pain in the ass. And I think in that whole, you know, covering multiple devices, I mean, there's responsive web and media queries, but there's also just, you know, the sort of way that CSS lays things out. If we had a decent Flexbox model that we could like agree on, I would say that's a far better approach than the sort of targeted versioning we do in native deployment. I use things now in websites like SVG and, you know, background sizing pretty comfortably, knowing that it's going to work everywhere, and it's amazing for handling every device.
Yeah, what's great, I think, about some of the innovations in the web has been like responsive design, right? I mean, that's not a pure technical innovation, but certainly a great movement forward, especially as we get to different types of devices and what the web experiences. And I think that's a great example of where maybe native, maybe it's not purely because of native, but certainly because of these different screen sizes has been a great movement forward for the web. So I think we're going to continue to improve the web, and I think native's going to continue to improve as well. I don't think it's an either or.
I wanted to sort of dovetail with what you were saying, Abe, about being able to get to non-Apple devices. So right now we've got this Android iOS situation. Do you think Windows 8 Phone is going to matter? Do you think Windows 8 is going to matter? How do you see that?
So we polled our developer community recently, I think just last month, and 48% of them said, you know, we're going to be looking at Windows Phone 8 to actually develop applications for it when it comes out. So I do think that...
Did you check the IP addresses of the...
Yeah, they're here in the US.
Redmond.
Yeah. So no, I think there are going to be more players in this space, and I think that BB10 has potential. I think, you know, it will be released next
BlackBerry
year.
10, RIM
Yeah.
BlackBerry 10.
Yeah. You know, if they're still around, I think they'll be...
You know, they just sold their headquarters, right? Darius County?
Yeah. So no, I do think that you know, it has the potential to turn around the company, and I think the Torch acquisition, they bought Torch Mobile, which was WebKit, has the potential to actually make BlackBerry you know, first-class citizen again inside of mobile. So, you know, you take a look at iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Windows Phone, and all the other vendors that are coming in and trying to tackle this huge market. I mean, it's just to assume that Android and iOS are the only ones that are going to win out of this is foolish. So I think that the web is the only one that's going to be able to keep up with this, you know, screen size, devices, televisions, cars, refrigerators, all of that stuff is going to happen. And when you think of trying to do that as either a company or as an individual developer, your best option is the web. I honestly, truly believe that.
So Kevin, you haven't told me anything, but I know that Microsoft approached you to pay you to do a Windows 8 Phone app and a Windows 8 app. What'd you tell them?
We are doing a Windows 8 app.
You took the money. Good for you.
Yeah, in fact, it's surprising. The uptick has been surprisingly good, given how new it is.
So you were a launch partner, and you were there when they...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is Walmart changing their strategy then?
What's that?
Is Walmart changing their strategy now?
I was just thinking about it.
We should have taken the money! That's the whole reason for this event.
Yeah. They just wanted to ask Kevin one question.
Oh, that's awesome.
I would throw on that in addition to the Apple Add to Home screen, what Microsoft has done with Windows 8 in terms of enabling, distributing a JavaScript SDK and enabling Node on the hardware, also has been tremendous for web. And like if Apple and Google went that way, I'd be super satisfied. That would be great.